Hey, this is Aaron from Knights of Last Call. Today I'd like to talk to you guys about our Knights of Last Call mega campaign, the Northern Reaches, and specifically go over the new area that is unlocking for players, Northport. So before I get into that, if you haven't heard of Northern Reaches, I'm going to go over a little bit about what that is. So Northern Reaches is a shared campaign experience with the Patreons of Knights of Last Call. There is about a little under 100 players currently signed up for this game and around 24 game masters. And, you're looking at anywhere between 6 to 9 games a week going on in Pathfinder 2. And these games take place in a shared universe, a campaign setting that is a mix of Glorian lore as well as some of our own kind of creations in a land called the Northern Reaches, and what you might expect to be more of a northern section, part of Glorian. This is a unknown land, a untamed wilderness filled with vast riches and resources as well as great danger. And naturally, adventurers have come here to kind of pioneer the land and claim it for their own. So this campaign started officially back at the beginning of April of this year. And the way that this mega campaign works is that GMs who are other members of the Discord can decide to post a game, or players can ask them to post a game, and then other players who are available can sign up and bring their characters and then go on adventures. And the results of these adventures are tabulated and correlated by who we call the overlords, which are basically super GMs. And the results of these adventures impact and change all of the other games that are going on in the region. So, for example, players who went in and started messing around with some orcs in one of the areas called the Bloodlands started to antagonize these orcs, who decided that enough was enough and that these newcomers needed to be dealt with. So we had a new clock, which is a way of measuring progress to an event. If you're familiar with Forge in the Dark games, this is the same exact concept. Another way of phrasing it is, if you've read the Pathfinder 2 GMG, this is like a subsystem where you can have these clocks increment. And basically, as more players antagonized the orcs, they would get closer to unifying and having a unified front come and attack the city that the players lived in. Now, other players in the campaign didn't want this to happen, and so started supporting orc rebels who wanted to have a more peaceful resolution. And they worked very hard to make sure that the orcs didn't unify and come up against the city. And in this case, those players were actually successful in pulling that off. They completed their clock first. And so now in the lore of the game, there is an orc civil war going on now where the orcs are fighting amongst themselves, and the player city is blissfully removed from that. So that's just one example of how players can change their fates and kind of control what's going on. One of the cool things about this campaign is that there isn't a preset story or preset arc. GMs who play in it have their own agendas and own story bits that they want to share, but it's all emergent. It's all play to find out, right? So even the GMs can be surprised, and the overlords are often very surprised in the direction things go. As these reports come in, the overlords will look and see, oh, this is an interesting thread, and then produce clocks or stories or tidbits, or sprinkle in some of these ideas into other GM games where they can incorporate this stuff. So, all of a sudden undead start rising in one area. Other GMs may take that and include that into their own games so that other players go, wait, I've heard about this before. This group over here found that, right? A very common example is a venturing party might explore a dungeon and find a sealed off level that they can't break into, and then go back and ask other players to come along and see if they could figure it out or solve the puzzle, or other players may just take the opportunity to go and do it. So in a way, Northern Reaches is kind of like a tabletop MMO in that you're constantly dealing with different players. Your party makeups are constantly changing. And some people become powerful enough and influential enough where you just simply know who their characters are because of some of the deeds they've done. And that's where it actually differs a little bit from an MMO, is that it's still a tabletop game. So some of these challenges and creatures and discoveries happen once, and that is it. Something that recently happened was a party of higher level adventurers went up against a very powerful and horrible spider queen called the Weaver. You can think of like Shelob from Lord of the Rings. This creature was basically sending her brood across the entire campaign. So game masters who weren't even necessarily playing in this region would be able to add free spiders to their encounters, right? Free in the sense that it didn't cost them anything from their GM budget, but players would have to deal with these additional threats. And worse, they wouldn't really get experience for them either, because they were just a nuisance. So the players were getting kind of annoyed by this, and every couple of weeks the spider would grow in power. So some heroes banded together to go fight this creature. Now they prevailed, and I believe the game was streamed, so you can check it out if you're interested in it. But that was a one and done sort of thing. So those characters had that unique experience, which everyone in the entire mega campaign was aware of, and many people watched the stream as it went down. But that's over now. That's only the players that played in that got to have that experience. So that's where it's different than a traditional MMO, in that you can still have these unique experiences, but it's in this shared universe. And of course, there's many other unique experiences that people can have. So, currently there's a large band of heroes preparing to deal with a troublesome dragon that has grown in threat and power. And enough is enough, apparently. So they're going to try to deal with that dragon, but she's also quite powerful. So if you're interested in learning more about the Northern Reaches, consider joining the Patron. It's available to everyone who is a knight or higher in the Patron, and basically you can sign up and you play as a player, play as a GM, or do both. We have GMs who enjoy running games and playing in games and are very passionate about it. So there's usually always something going on and something new and developing. The way the mega campaign works is we run it in seasons. A season typically lasts about a year, and this season will continue into November. And there are some catch-up mechanics too if you're starting late, so don't let that stop you. As the city levels up, the lower minimum level of new characters also levels up, so it's always a good time to jump in and join. Also, if you are looking to try out Pathfinder 2 and you haven't had a shot, perhaps there isn't a lot of games where you live, or you just haven't found the same interest, this is a great place for it. Many of our players are playing Pathfinder 2 for the first time and are using this as a way to jump in and kind of learn it. If you have always wanted to game master but feel that you're not ready, or have been hesitant about it, or that you just want to try it out to see if you like it and don't want to commit to a full campaign, Northern Reaches is also great for you. We have some very specific types of adventures that are great for both new players and new game masters to get their feet wet. You can come in, run a couple hours of a session, run a fight, see what you like, and see what you think about it, and decide if you want to keep doing it or not doing it. There's no commitment. The only thing we ask is if you schedule a game that you play the game. But we've had game masters show up, give it a shot, and decided it wasn't for them. And shockingly, we've had a ton of players who decided they were very interested in game mastering and ended up enjoying it more than playing. So it's a great time to learn how to play the game and get that experience, and do so in a phenomenal environment. If you're not familiar with the Knights of Last Call Discord, it is a tremendous collection of amazing players, but even more so with game masters. We have a very large group of just experienced game masters from not just Pathfinder 2, but all kinds of different games, who come together to share their ideas and thoughts. They're always looking forward and happy to sharing their wisdom and experience with newer people into the hobby. It really is just a great community to be part of. So if you're interested, links down below. Go ahead, check it out. There's a bunch of different player guides you can read. They kind of give you an idea of what's going on, different ways to kind of catch up on recent events. Bob, fellow member of the Knights of Last Call, likes to do some newsreels, so you can get some quick summaries that way as well. And it's just a really fun time. So if you haven't heard of it, give it a shot, check it out, and hope to see you there. So moving on to what this video is about. In the Northern Reaches, we have several zones that the game takes place in. There is the Broken Coast, more to the west, which is a cold and kind of bitter land, not a lot of vegetation. Lots of shipwrecks occurred here. The expedition to get to the Northern Reaches was a very dangerous one, and many people did not make it. And they often ended up here in the Broken Coast. Their ships shattered against the rocks. So some of the efforts that early adventure parties did were to go here and save some of these people. And this is how they unlocked a new ancestry, basically the lizard folk ancestry, because one of the larger ships they were able to save were a crew of lizardmen. So those are now playable characters. But in the Broken Coast, there are all kinds of just dark things. You'll typically deal with a lot of undead. There's also a devil problem going on at the moment, though the problem there is the devils are offering very good trades for players, and many players have made the bargain with the devil in this front because they're offering some interesting incentives. So sometimes the threats are not just the enemies. Sometimes it's your fellow players you have to keep an eye on. But in the Broken Coast, there's been several adventures leading deep into the caves, exploring different shipwrecks and whatnot. But to the north of the Broken Coast, you have a place called the Bloodlands. And in the Bloodlands, this is a place named not only for the constant tribal warfare, but the red ore that can be found pretty much everywhere in the land. And this here is currently undergoing a civil war, which basically the players started amongst the orcs. So the orcs are fighting, and that's actually reaching a climax now. That will be the next major battle, I believe, that we stream online for everyone to enjoy. As the orcs are finally breaking through to the rebel orcs are breaking through to the Orc King now, and the final assault on the Citadel is about to begin. So what will happen there, I don't know. The players could win, they could lose. I know that Bob certainly is going to make this a challenge for people, but I also know that the players have always risen to the challenge on these sort of things. So we'll see what they can come up with here and what they can do. But it will be an exciting time. And one thing I can say is when these type of events happen, the campaign changes, and it's a new day afterwards. So it will be exciting to see what happens there. In the southeast, you have the Jagged Pine Forest. This is a very interesting place. A lot of interesting stories have come out here. You have your typical fey creatures going on, and this is also what was once the home of the Weaver, though she is now slain and her brood scattered. But you also have a lot of clockwork, dungeons, and mysteries going on here. And one of the things that the town has done recently, the players in the town, has recovered various clockwork artifacts, bringing them back to the city, and trying to understand what's going on there. And this has actually started a clock to unlock some of the more uncommon classes found in Guns and Gears, which is what the players are currently working on now. So an interesting turn of events there. And then in between the Jagged Pine Forest and the Bloodlands, a new zone opened up not too long ago called the Dragonclaw Mountains. And this is a place filled, as naturally, with dragons and their ancient magics, and the players have just begun to explore this region and face these mighty foes. Already they begin to recover powerful magical artifacts, which they begin bringing back to the town. So we've already seen some expansion there, and the characters range between levels 2 and some are up to level 6 at this point in the campaign. So lots of interesting and different games going on. Today I'm revealing our 5th and 2nd unlocked zone, which is the town of Northport itself. So Northport up to this point has been basically little more than a camp and a collection of shacks and tents and whatever random shelter people could provide. This is where the expedition landed on the continent and where the players made their home, such as it is. But now the town has leveled up a few times thanks to the efforts of the players, and has survived several rather dangerous things, including a minor plague. So it has stood the challenge and tested thus far, and has grown to accommodate that. So now, instead of a collection of shacks and tents, the town has a proper wall. It has proper buildings, thanks to the aid of a couple different wizards who offered their time and resources. Construction has occurred rather quickly, and there's a full-fledged area now, town, including with different neighborhoods and districts that players can explore and take advantage of. So it's a great time. If you're looking to play an investigator or a more city-oriented adventure, or you're more interested in running one, you now have a place where you can do that sort of thing. But that's not all. If you're also looking for some traditional dungeon delving, which the mega campaign is known for, there's a lot going on underneath Northport now. So turns out that Northport was built on top of lots of different ruins upon ruins upon ruins of apparently previously failed expeditions that have tried to come into the northern reaches and take it for their home. So this is a bittersweet moment for everyone, because it's great that Northport is now advancing to this point and players have a true home base to work out from, but they're going to find out that they were not the first here, and all the ones before them failed. As to why, unknown at this point. But bad things happen to those who come here, so we'll see if they're ready or not to deal with that. So today, I'm going to give an overview of the new PDF coming out for Northport. Players in Northern Reaches will have access to this along with this video. This video is really just kind of a brief summary of what to expect in the book, and a little bit of thoughts behind what we were kind of thinking about it. So, Northport, Gateway to the Reaches. In the PDF, there are 3 major sections of the book, talking about the main districts of the town itself, talking about some of the major factions in the town, and this is kind of a prelude to things to come, which I'll get into when we get in that section. And then the last section is called The Depths, and this is about the dungeons beneath Northport. So again, this city is ripe for adventure. Northport itself is an adventure zone that covers levels 2 through 9, so it is by far the largest range of levels that we have available in the Northern Reaches. The other zones so far, most have been 1 through 3, the earlier ones. Bloodlands is 1 through 5. And the Dragonclaw Mountains, I believe, goes up to level 7. So Northport has a large range, and the reason we did that was because obviously this is the main city and hub for the entire campaign. We wanted to make sure it remained relevant throughout the majority of the campaign. So if you really enjoy city adventures, or really want to get into kind of like the mega dungeon beneath it, this is an area that will stay relevant for a very long time, and hopefully give players and game masters plenty of room to explore the mysteries there. So within the PDF, we have a map. It's a two-page spread map, and this will of course be available for the players as well directly, and it kind of just gives you a high-level overview of what's going on in the city. Some areas are called out in it. The Tavern of Last Call, of course, is neatly labeled, but again, one of the things about the Northern Reaches is this isn't just the overlords kind of dictating what's going on. A huge principle, if you've watched Derek's video about Dungeon World or Powered by Apocalypse Games, but in this campaign as well, a huge principle we follow is leave blanks. And particularly when you have 24 different game masters, we really want our game masters to feel empowered in this campaign. It's more so their campaign than it is our campaign. So while this is probably the most structured zone that we're releasing so far, and we did that intentionally to kind of help channel creativity so that people had an idea or were inspired by some of the things in here. The purpose of this is not to give you a detailed key of every building in the town. Instead, we want to kind of paint a broad picture here so that game masters can latch on to things and get very excited. If you're a game master who just loves the idea of what's going on in the Foregate, well, take that and own that, and you tell us what's in there. You tell us what buildings and places of adventure are in there. So very much that same kind of Northern Reaches approach, where the game masters have a ton of flexibility to tell their own stories, and those stories become the actual campaign stories. So this here is more of just a guide and suggestion of where those adventures might take place. So we give you guys a large map to play with, and then jump into the districts. There are 5 major districts of Northport. You have Old Town, Docktown, the Foregate, God's Rest, and the Silent Grove. One of the approaches we took for the design here was to make it messy. And the idea behind that was this is not a well-planned town. This was a camp that quickly had to expand and grow and defend itself and deal with multiple threats. So the organization is not something you might see in a well-planned city. And so some of the phrases and terminology and how the town is built are intentionally a little messy to really kind of re-emphasize that, hey, this kind of grew organically, right? The districts have, kind of an official structure to them and an official name. But within the districts, the neighborhoods, it's much more about local colloquialisms, meaning, it's more of what the people kind of refer to the area. And so you're going to see some overlap in the sense of like the types of names used, right? You're going to see district used a lot, neighborhood used a lot. But the idea behind that is this is a messy, organic city that's just sprawling out quickly, almost kind of like a city in the gold rush era, right? Where, hey, adventurers are here, and treasure and wealth and magic are being found. Grow, right? So that's why that looks that way, right? We really wanted to have that organic and living feel to the town. Within, as I mentioned before, we have 5 major districts. Going over some of them. In Old Town is really where the original Northport began, right? This is where the original camps were. This is where the tavern was built, the Tavern of the Last Call, the kind of main hub, even in our Foundry game, where all the player characters hang out. This is what remains of that initial kind of camp, and even so here, it's kind of been built back up in a way, right? So some adventurers have been quite successful and have bought nice homes in this area, or rather built nice homes. There were none to buy, they had to build them, and some of the more established NPCs have built up here. So it's a weird mix of kind of old money and also just like abandoned projects, because some players or some NPCs just moved on or didn't come back or died in things like the plague or whatnot, right? So it's an interesting place, but this is basically the adventurer district of the town. It has 3 kind of neighborhoods. The first district, which, as I mentioned, is kind of where most of the camps were. It has Nighttown. Nighttown is where the Tavern of the Knights of Last Call is, as well as various adventure-specific kind of crafting buildings or things that really just service adventurers, right? Because this has always been an adventure city, right? And that area has pretty much remained in service to the adventurers. And then there's a slum portion in Old Town where basically people who didn't have anywhere else to go and didn't have any means to get there have kind of congregated, right? And one of the things with this town is it's not a perfect utopia. It has a lot of the bad things that come with the town. And that was important to us because we wanted to make sure that people had good and positive things to explore. It's not pretty. This also can lead to adventure. It can lead to things like criminal activities. It can lead to things like desperation. It can lead to players maybe wanting to make some positive changes in their town. And we want to make sure that players who are interested in it have that opportunity. Heroism is something that isn't automatic. It needs to be proven. It needs to be a sacrifice, right? And so in order for that to be real, you have to give those kind of opportunities for that. Also, there's more monstrous sort of threats in the town, right? Bob was laughing when we were going through the editing phase of this book because I had a note about vampire dens in the town. He's like, vampire dens? Where's this coming from? And I was like, listen, wherever there's people, there's going to be undead. And that's just a thing. And so you have this civilization now. Absolutely, there's going to be vampires that are hiding out and, taking advantage of the less fortunate people in the town. Right now, we're not going out of our way as of yet to specifically say, hey, there's a vampire problem, but that might be something that a GM gets inspired by, and now we have a vampire problem, right? Just like we might have a gang problem or a corrupt politician. This is the sort of stuff you might see in a city adventure, and it's important to us that we paint a broad enough picture there that GMs can find what they're interested in and really explore that thread with their players. So hopefully you guys find a lot of different things that inspire you here that you can play with. Docktown is what you would expect. This is where all the ships come in. Keep in mind how important of a port this is. This is the lifeline from the northern reaches to the rest of Glorian. And in a way, it goes both ways, right? There's a lot of vast riches being found here that Glorian, the rest of Glorian, can benefit from. But this town, basically, without this lifeline, is dead. And it really relies on the shipments that are coming in. And furthermore, the player characters rely on the magic items coming in. As the town levels, of course, they can buy higher level goodies. It's not the best goodies. The best stuff, of course, is out in the wilderness, out in the deep dungeons. But, say a level 4 item is a level 4 item. So Docktown is where the ships come in. You have the shipwright district where more boats are being built and where other ones are being repaired. You have a warehouse district, which is where all the supplies are stored. I'm sure there'll be some heists and criminal shenanigans going on there shortly enough. And you have Spice Town. Spice Town is not only known or named for the rare herbs and spices that are stored there, but some of the other spicier things you might find in the seedy part of the city. So that's where that piece is. You have the Fore Gate, one of my favorite parts of the town. This is a very lively part of town, kind of like the cultural melting part. This part of town has lots of narrow streets with flags kind of crossing the lane, very colorful section. Many of the different races mingle here. There's a part of this town called the Foreigner District, which I think is kind of funny because the whole town is a bunch of foreigners into this land, but this is where like a lot of the uncommon ancestries are hanging out. And the whole area is just filled with just amazingly varied restaurants and shops and just constant just like partying in a way, right? There's always something going on in the Fort Gate, think of it as like, I don't know, like a college town in a way. So very lively, very active part of the Fort Gate. Now, of course, where anything is lively and exciting, there's also it's a recipe for adventure, right? So who knows what else is going on in there. You have the Foreigner District in the Fort Gate. You have the North Market. It's a huge section just filled with stalls of all kinds of different things. I think markets are great. I think in a game like Pathfinder 2, it has a good economy built into the game. It's a great opportunity for game masters to kind of explore that. There's the core rules of the game where you have to buy you can only buy up to the town of the level of the settlement. But this is an opportunity for game masters within their adventures to go, you might find a rare deal in North Market, right? But there might be adventure with that too. Maybe your coin purse gets stolen. Maybe you get sold something that is a bum. Maybe you get sold something that is actually very powerful, but perhaps cursed, or perhaps people want that, right? North Market is where you can go and maybe find something beyond what you can just get out of the player's handbook. So I'm really looking forward to seeing if game masters pick up on that thread and play with that. And then you have the Crafter's Corner, where you have a lot of crafting going on. Crafting is something that has been pretty popular in the northern reaches. It's something that the players have improved in the game. I think, one of the criticisms of Pathfinder 2, if you play, is that crafting is not particularly good. And one of the things that these guys have been able to do, thanks to the red ore of the Bloodlands, is to improve crafting. And there's going to be more opportunities down the road to continue to improve that. So the Crafter's Corner kind of exposes a little bit more of that aspect and allows game masters to entice players of like, hey, maybe you want a better magic sword. Well, you could probably find a master smith in the Crafter's Corner, but maybe that leads into some other adventure. So God's Rest is the third major district of the town, a much quieter area of town, much more quiet than the Foregate, for example. And this is where all the different shrines and temples of the various Glorian gods have kind of come together to kind of have their own area. And in a weird, even though we're of different faiths, we have this kind of unified principle that binds us. And the gods have had quite a presence in the northern reaches, thanks again to their players. What started off as a player making shrines to Desna has turned into Desna blessing the expedition, improving how many aspects of the game works. And now we have actual temples built to her, as well as other gods making their presence known. So again, driven by players, this is something that has now changed the campaign. And this is the section of town that really kind of reflects the efforts that those players have done to bring their gods to life here. So within God's Rest, you have three sections. You got the Godstone, which has the main temple of Desna in here, a big piece on the map. But also many other temples have begun to build up in this area. So it's basically a neighborhood of churches. You have the Ranger's Wood, which is for the more natural faves, right? And this is kind of a natural preserve section of the town where there is an actual wood there. And if you guys have ever played EverQuest, the first one, this was definitely inspired by what was the name of it? I don't remember, but it was near Kinos, and it was where the Ranger and Druid characters started. And it was a forest, and there were some caves in there and whatnot. And the Rangers would get very upset if you went in there hunting the bears, and that kind of what's inspired this area. There's some wildlife in that area, typically not very dangerous predators because it is inside of a town. But if characters decide to go in there and start messing with some of the wildlife, well, the Rangers and Druids are not going to be very appreciative of that. So just keep that in mind if you find some adventure in that area. And then the third neighborhood of God's Rest is Beggarstown, right? This started off as more of the kind of monk era, monastic kind of faiths, very Spartan characters, kind of just looking for a place to pray and meditate. And naturally, many of the downtrodden of the town came here to take advantage or hopefully receive assistance from the more compassionate people that might be in this area of town. And they needed a place to stay, and the monks were pretty neutral on the whole matter since they were already living a very Spartan life. And so the non-monk kind of characters basically just put up shop here in this area and kind of hang out there. So Beggarstown is where a lot of the people who have nowhere else to go ended up. The last major district of the town is also the most mysterious, and it is called the Silent Grove. And the Silent Grove is a very eerie woodland that surrounds a lake, and within the lake is the Silver Tower, where a very little known organization of wizards and researchers and scholars dwell. And they rarely talk to people, and they're rarely seen. They kind of showed up one day, and they offered their services for things like casting lots of wall of stones and whatnot to help build the town up, and have retreated back into their tower to basically research the northern reaches. And a lot of the exploits that the players have done over time, including bringing in some of the clockwork stuff, finding the new mysteries, returning some of the lore books. These guys have begun to curate and collect to see what the deeper truths are of the northern reaches, which they're not really inclined to share with people. So their section of town is quite different than the natural woodland of the Ranger's Wood. They have what are called wards, which are basically north, south, east, and west wards of what appears to be just untamed woodland, but they are weirdly quiet, and they allow no one, including the citizens of the town, to go in there. So, and they will remove people quite harshly if someone goes into those areas. Some people speculate that maybe that's where some of their experiments are. Some people think that maybe that's where their hidden labs are. But at this point, it's all speculation. The only thing that they permit people to do is to walk down the main street, to leave through the Jagged Pine Gate on the eastern wall, or to go back into the main city through the western wall of their neighborhood. But other than that, they don't want people trespass on their area, and they stick to themselves. So we'll see what happens with that. So, moving on to the next section of the book, we have the major factions, and this is kind of a teaser of things to come. So, one of the other projects that we're working on for Northern Reaches, which we have not talked about a lot yet, is kind of the first major expansion to it. And when we say expansion, we mean really changing up the gameplay elements. We have added a couple of zones now at this point, which are great, and obviously add more things for players and game masters alike to do. But we also just want to introduce new concepts into it. And the first expansion that we're going to tackle, we call it Dominion. And Dominion is basically the idea now that, hey, some of these areas have begun to be tamed, right? The lower level areas now, places like the Jagged Pine Forest, the Broken Coast, and not too far in the distant future, even the Bloodlands, their challenges have been faced and met and have been overcome. This is an opportunity now for the expedition to expand out, to begin building strongholds in this region, to really begin to exploit the resources of these regions, right? And so Dominion's going to cover that aspect. It's about getting strongholds. It's about holding these territories. It's about managing these resources. These resources can come back to provide buffs for everyone in the campaign. These resources can help influence what we call the major factions that are rising in Northport. And initially, there is a major faction for each district, but part of the gameplay in Dominion is going to be about players creating their own factions. So, if you don't particularly like the Wizards of the Silver Tower, or you feel that your character is powerful enough to maybe, become King of the Reach or whatever, that will be an opportunity for you. Now, of course, besides just the mechanics of dealing with that, no man can stand alone. So you'll need to make sure you have quite a good friendship circle or people who are loyal to your cause that will support you in that. A key piece of Dominion is convincing other players to join with you. So we're really looking forward to talking about that more very shortly. But we wanted to give a little bit of a teaser of kind of some of these players that you'll see a lot more of as time goes on. And for game masters who are reading this section and want to take advantage of it, these are additional assets for you to use. Just like everything else, just like the areas and regions that we're kind of broadly painting, these factions are broadly painted. They all have some sort of agenda and goal and a general kind of feel to them, but who they are and what happens within them, the game masters are free to expand on those stories and make it their own. So this is just a starting point. So if you want to run an adventure that involves the Guild of Shadows, run an adventure that involves the Guild of Shadows and expand that lore, right? Perhaps their influence will expand. Perhaps what they do will change. Perhaps they'll become interested in something else thanks to the adventures that your players go on. Perhaps they will be completely destroyed and removed, and a new faction will take their place. We don't know. This is just a starting point. It's up to the game masters and the players to decide what happens next. The starting major factions, we have the Knights of the Reach. It's a more militant order, and they actually are somewhat a mix of old adventurers that initially came to the Reaches, or people who really bought into the legend and the lore of the adventurers, right? But they hold the concepts of like honor and chivalry. So on the surface, a very noble group, but they have a rather militant look at things, right? They think that spending time dealing with internal politics of the town and doing anything rather than really preparing the town for defense and going on the offensive when they can is a waste of time and resources. The Northern Reaches are a very dangerous place, and there are a lot of unknown threats, and even the known threats are quite capable of destroying the city. So they take an almost martial law approach to the situation, where they feel that, hey, listen, we don't have time to mess around with this other stuff. We have to be ready for the wars that are coming, for the wars that we're in. So with every faction, we try to give kind of a good thing and a bad thing that went with that faction, not to make them just these boring, one-dimensional things, right? The knights, yes, they're honorable, they're chivalrous, they're going to protect people, but the knights are also the kind of group that might be like, hey, let's arm the peasants and prepare to defend this city because the dark is coming, right? And we need to fight against it. So the next faction is the Guild of Shadows. These guys work mostly out of the dock district because it's easier for them to control information, control supplies, and that sort of thing. This is a guild that you might imagine to be of thieves and assassins, and on the surface they look like just a typical criminal organization. However, beneath the surface, they have a very specific and noble goal, and that is to protect Northport from the influences of Glorian. Northport and Northern Reaches represents a time of very interesting possibility for some of the large kingdoms in Glorian, some of the other areas that the other adventures take place in. This is an area that is filled with magic, filled with treasure and wealth and resources, and there are plenty of other kingdoms that would want to capitalize on that. But the Guild of Shadows really wants to make sure that Northport remains neutral and independent. It doesn't want to become, a colony of the Hell Knights, right? It doesn't want to bend the knee to any of these other areas in Glorian. It wants to remain independent, and so their assassinations, their criminal activities really focuses on keeping the politics in check. So again, on the surface, these guys might just be jerks and thieves, but underneath they have that very noble goal of making sure Northport remains independent. You have the Merchants Alliance. The Merchants Alliance works out of the Foregate. This is a collection of crafters and merchants who are really seeking to maximize wealth and prosperity in the city. They brought in a lot of the trade that's now coming in. They're really trying to keep the adventurers furnished with good gear and good equipment. They are looking to expand what they can do here. The downside, of course, is that, listen, if you don't have a lot of money, you're not really of interest to them. They don't have time or patience for charity or the downtrodden. So this is an alliance that's great for the adventurers, but maybe not so great for the people who were down on their luck. You have the Divine Commune, which is a very interesting group. This is a loosely associated circle of faiths, and there are a lot of different faiths in Glorian, and not all of them get along together. But here in Northport, they're making the attempt because of all the other different factions in the town, they feel like their interests need to be represented in some way, so they've bound together. But there's a lot of infighting that occurs there. On the surface, they have a general sense of compassion and well-being for the people and taking care of everyone, but beneath the surface, they are vying for control within their own faction as well as against the others. So a lot of political intrigue going on within that faction. And then the last faction is the Arcanium College, and these are the group I mentioned before that dwell in the Silver Tower. Very secretive and rarely share their information, though they have quite a bit of it. And they are here to try to figure out the deeper mysteries of what's going on in the Reaches. As to if they're going to share that information with anyone, it is unknown, but the answer is most likely not. So those are the starting factions, and where they go and how they influence adventures will be up to the game masters and to the players, but you will see more of them as time goes on. The last section of the PDF is called The Depths, and this is about everything beneath Northport. So Northport is a very interesting zone that we're releasing because it actually consists of many different zones. Now, a game master who signs up to run Northport Adventures gains access to all of these, and so you just have a ton of variety to play different games. You can run a city adventure in Northport itself, or you can run a traditional dungeon adventure beneath Northport. The structure of this, if you've ever seen a mega dungeon, it follows a very similar kind of approach where we provide a profile map of the layers and dungeons beneath Northport, and they are intertwined and fairly non-linear in that you can explore a lot of different areas and find access to other different areas. So game masters have a ton of flexibility in where and how they want to run their adventures. At the higher levels, and obviously as you go deeper, it gets more dangerous, but at the higher levels, you have the Northport sewers, a relatively new architectural project that the city's put on. Obviously, the town is growing, and with town growing, you're going to have to deal with everyone's waste. And so the sewers were a pretty important project that they started on early, and they dug in deep to start preparing for all that. And as they dug in, they started to find that there were ruins underneath the city. So Northport, they are not the first people that have come here and not the first people to have built here. And so beneath the sewers, you have the unknown ruins. And then deeper below that, you have different kinds of ruins from other different people who've been here. So there are layers upon layers of different civilizations that have been built here, and apparently all have met their end. And the question is, will Northport become the most recent layer beneath the surface? So only time will tell. Kind of at the same level of the Northport sewers and accessible on the surface are also the sea caves. And the sea caves are a little bit outside the main town, but these are caves that often are flooded with the seawater that comes in. But as the tide pulls out, the caves become accessible, and you can enter the caves, and from the caves access various different levels of the depths. So just another way to kind of explore the mega dungeon. Beneath the ruins, you have the sunken crypts. Beneath the sunken crypts, you have the corrupted laboratory. The interesting thing about the corrupted laboratory is there is a single exit, a single entrance into another level called the vault. And that's the only way you can enter the vault. Beneath the corrupted laboratory and the vault is the shadow gloom. And then beneath the shadow gloom, it goes off into the unknown depths. So this map doesn't even cover all that there is to see. There is more even further down. And it'll be up to the players and game masters to see what horrible things lay down there. So I won't go into full detail on this here. There are some more teasers and hints within the guide that you can read if you're interested, but that is kind of the high level of what is going on beneath Northport. Now, in addition to all this, the map is constantly changing already. Even at the time of this shooting, we have players who are trying to construct a library within the town. And what's interesting is that's not just something that shows up on the map. The library has a very functional purpose too. With Northern Reaches, we always like to tie the narrative into mechanics and mechanics into narrative, right? Like, we don't like just to have fluff. We like to really make these things as real and as immersive as possible. So this library, while it would be a place in the game, the library serves a mechanical benefit that players who find uncommon scrolls or rare scrolls can basically put them in this library to allow the other casters, the other players, to come in and kind of scribe them. So a lot of players are very intrigued by this idea and are working together to invest and build this library. Not too far outside of the town is a clockwork castle, which a group of players discovered and were able to move back into the area. So players are constantly changing the campaign and making it their own and bringing in these new ideas. And it gets very interesting when you have so many of them working on this, and not always together. There's a current tug of war going on right now where there's a clock in the Jagged Pine where if characters support the Fae spirits there, they will be able to unlock free archetype druid for everyone. But if instead the expedition capitalizes on the resources of Jagged Pine, Northport will gain another level, which is very powerful for everyone. It means access to new magic items. It means the minimum level of the starting characters goes up. So this is one of those situations where it's a tough choice, right? And some players want one and other players want the other. And that clock has moved a lot, but it's kind of stuck where it's at right now because players are kind of fighting over where that will go. So, and as overlords, we don't know. We're just kind of looking forward to see what happens and where they take it next. So that's the high level of what's coming out here. Northport should officially be opened next week. Game Masters will begin access pretty quickly now that this is ready to go out, and will begin building their adventures. So if you're interested, now's a great time to sign up. Keep in mind, this is just one area of the campaign. There's 4 other large areas, each filled with lore, and adventure and dungeons and dangers and treasures and all kinds of crazy things going on. So if this is something you're interested in, again, check it out below. Consider joining the Patreon, learning more about what's happening, or leave a comment below if you have some questions, and one of the knights will get back to you to let you know. So I hope you've enjoyed this preview and overview of Northport, Gateway to the Reach, and I look forward to seeing you in game. Peace.